The rain hammered against the tall windows of Castello Venetian, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants, where reservations were made months in advance, and the wrong last name could keep you waiting at the door indefinitely. The November storm had rolled in from the Atlantic just after sunset, transforming the Upper East Side into a blur of umbrellas and taxi lights reflecting off wet pavement. Inside, the atmosphere was warm and intimate. Crystal chandeliers cast soft amber light over white tablecloths, and the quiet murmur of conversation mixed with the delicate notes of a piano in the corner. The scent of fresh basil, garlic, and expensive wine filled the air. It was the kind of place where power was discussed in whispers, where deals that would never see a courtroom were sealed with handshakes and vintage Barolo. Emma Sullivan moved between the tables with practiced efficiency, balancing a tray of appetizers with the ease of someone who had been doing this far too long. At 26, she had the kind of beauty that people often overlooked. Soft brown eyes that noticed everything, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and a quiet presence that made her nearly invisible to the wealthy clientele she served. She preferred it that way. "Excuse me, miss?" An older woman in pearls raised one manicured finger. "Is the risotto gluten-free?" Emma smiled politely, though this was the third time tonight she'd answered that exact question. "I can ask the chef to prepare it with rice flour, ma'am. It'll take an additional 15 minutes. The woman waved her hand dismissively. "Never mind. I'll have the branzino." Emma nodded, making a note on her pad, and moved toward the kitchen. Her feet ached in the cheap flats she wore, and she could feel the beginning of a headache pressing behind her eyes. This was her second shift today. She'd worked the morning at a diner in Hell's Kitchen before coming here. Between both jobs, she was pulling nearly 70 hours a week. It still wasn't enough. Her father's medical bills from his final year continued to arrive like clockwork, each envelope a reminder of everything she'd lost. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer had taken him 8 months ago, and the debt had fallen to her, $63,000 and counting, when she factored in the interest. "Emma, table 7 needs water," called Michael, the other server working the floor tonight. He was 22, still in college, and treated this job like a temporary inconvenience rather than a lifeline. "Got it," she replied, grabbing a pitcher from the service station. Table 7 was near the back corner, partially secluded by a decorative partition of frosted glass and dark wood. As Emma approached, she noticed the 3 men seated there for the first time that evening. They had arrived while she was in the kitchen, and something about them immediately set her instincts on edge. The man at the center was younger than she expected, early 30s perhaps, with dark hair styled back from a sharp, angular face. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Emma made in 3 months, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes, and a watch that caught the light when he reached for his wine glass. His eyes were a striking pale gray, the kind that seemed to see straight through pretense. But it wasn't his appearance that made Emma pause. It was the way he carried himself, the absolute stillness of someone who never doubted their command of any room they entered. And the 2 men flanking him, both built like professional athletes, with the telltale bulge of shoulder holsters beneath their jackets. Emma had grown up in Astoria, in a neighborhood where you learned to recognize certain things. The weight of a concealed weapon, the way men positioned themselves when they expected trouble, the particular quality of attention that separated bodyguards from friends. She knew what she was looking at, even if she didn't know the specifics. "Water?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral. The man in the center looked up at her, and for a moment something flickered in those pale eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or assessment. Then he smiled, and it transformed his entire face, making him look almost approachable. "Please," he said. His voice was quiet, refined, with just a hint of an accent she couldn't quite place. "And we'll need a few more minutes with the menu." "Of course." Emma filled their glasses, acutely aware of the tension at the table. The 2 bodyguards hadn't even glanced at their menus. They were watching the restaurant, cataloging exits and sightlines with professional precision. As Emma turned to leave, the man spoke again. "What's your name?" She hesitated. Customers asked this sometimes, and it was always a coin flip whether they were being friendly or entitled. "Emma, Emma," he repeated, as if testing the sound of it. "Thank you, Emma." There was something in the way he said it, a formality that felt almost old world, that made her look back at him. But his attention had already returned to the menu, dismissing her as thoroughly as if she'd ceased to exist. Emma retreated to the service station, telling herself to shake off the unease. This was Manhattan. Wealthy, powerful people dined here every night. The fact that these particular people made her nervous meant nothing, except it did. For the next 40 minutes, Emma watched that table from the corner of her eye while she served her other guests. The man in the center, she'd heard one of his companions call him Mr. Moretti, ate slowly, apparently unconcerned with whatever danger his bodyguards anticipated. He ordered the osso buco and declined dessert, speaking occasionally in low tones that Emma couldn't make out even when she brought their entrees. But she noticed other things. The way 3 different men had entered the restaurant separately over the past half hour, each alone, each refusing to check their coats, despite the rain. They'd been seated at different tables, one near the bar, one by the windows, one close to the kitchen entrance, but none of them had ordered more than drinks. They weren't eating. They were waiting. Emma's heartbeat quickened. She glanced toward the hostess stand, where Maria was checking reservations on her tablet, oblivious. Looked toward the kitchen where the sounds of clattering plates and shouted orders continued their normal rhythm. No one else had noticed. Maybe she was being paranoid. Maybe these were just business associates. Some elaborate corporate dinner where everyone arrived separately for plausible deniability. Maybe. The man by the bar stood up. So did the one by the windows. And the one near the kitchen. They moved in perfect synchronization, hands reaching inside their jackets. Time seemed to stretch and slow. Emma saw the barrel of a pistol emerge from the first man's coat, saw the second man pushing back his chair with deliberate purpose, saw the third one pulling something from his waistband that caught the light with cold metal certainty. Her mouth opened to scream, but no sound came out. "Nobody move." The shout came from the man by the bar, and suddenly all 3 were revealing their weapons, holding them with the casual confidence of people who had done this before. "This is between us and Moretti. Stay in your seats and you'll live through this." The restaurant erupted in chaos. A woman screamed. A man dove under his table. Glass shattered as someone knocked over a wine bottle. Emma stood frozen, the water pitcher still in her hand as her brain struggled to process what was happening. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen at Castello Venetian. This was the Upper East Side. This was... More men poured in through the front entrance. Emma counted 3, no, 4 more. The hostess, Maria, backed away with her hands raised, tears streaming down her face. The piano player abandoned his instrument and ran for the bathroom. 7 men total, all armed, all moving with coordinated precision toward table 7, toward Moretti. Emma's eyes snapped to the corner table. Moretti's bodyguards had already drawn their own weapons, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. One of them, the broader one with the scar on his cheek, stepped in front of Moretti, using his body as a shield. "You should have stayed in Brooklyn, Dante," said one of the gunmen, an older man with silver hair and a cashmere coat. He seemed to be the leader. "The Calabresi family sends its regards." The name meant nothing to Emma, but Moretti's expression darkened. He remained seated, apparently unconcerned despite the impossible odds. When he spoke, his voice was steady, almost bored. "Sal won't be pleased when he learns you failed." The silver-haired man laughed. "Who says we're going to fail?" Everything happened at once. The bodyguard with the scar fired first, hitting one of the gunmen in the shoulder. The wounded man stumbled back but didn't fall. Return fire erupted from 3 different directions. The bodyguard jerked as bullets struck him, and he collapsed across the table in a spray of shattered china and spilled wine. The second bodyguard went down an instant later, hit multiple times before he could take proper cover. Emma finally moved, diving behind the service station as more shots echoed through the restaurant. Her ears rang. Her hands shook so violently she could barely keep her grip on the water pitcher. Around her she could hear sobbing, screaming, the thunder of footsteps as people scrambled for exits. But most of the gunmen weren't interested in the other diners. They advanced on table 7 in a tightening circle, weapons trained on the one man still seated calmly in the corner. Emma risked a glance over the top of the service station. Moretti had finally stood, but he hadn't run. He faced the approaching men with his hands visible empty, apparently resigned to whatever came next. His expression was unreadable, not quite accepting, not quite defiant, just still. "Any last words?" the silver-haired man asked. "Tell Sal he's made a mistake," Moretti replied quietly. The leader raised his weapon, finger tightening on the trigger. Emma didn't think. Thinking would have stopped her, would have reminded her that she was a waitress from Astoria with a mountain of debt and dreams of nursing school. Thinking would have told her this wasn't her fight, wasn't her world, wasn't her problem. But her body moved before her mind could object. She was behind Moretti's table somehow, though she didn't remember crossing the distance. One of the fallen bodyguards lay sprawled beside her, his weapon just inches from her hand. Emma grabbed it, heavier than she'd expected, cold and solid, and raised it in one fluid motion born from pure adrenaline and survival instinct. The silver-haired man was 5 feet away, his attention entirely on Moretti. Emma pulled the trigger. The recoil jolted through her arms like lightning. The sound was deafening, overwhelming, nothing like the movies. The silver-haired man's eyes went wide with shock as the bullet struck him center mass. He stumbled backward, weapon clattering from his grip, and collapsed against an overturned chair. For one crystalline moment, everyone in the restaurant froze. Emma stood there, gun still raised, unable to process what she'd just done. The weapon trembled in her hands. Smoke curled from the barrel. Her ears rang with a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else. Then chaos exploded around her. The remaining gunmen turned toward her, weapons tracking to this new, impossible threat. But Moretti moved faster than she would have thought possible. He grabbed Emma by the shoulders and threw her down, covering her body with his own, as bullets chewed through the wooden partition above them. "Stay down," he hissed in her ear. In the distance, cutting through the ringing in her ears, Emma heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Sirens. Police sirens, growing rapidly closer. The gunmen heard them too. Emma saw hesitation ripple through their ranks, the calculation of whether they had time to finish what they'd started. In the end, survival instinct won. They scattered like shadows, some heading for the kitchen exit, others pushing past screaming diners toward the front door. Within seconds, the restaurant was empty of everyone except the terrified staff and customers. And Emma, still pinned beneath Moretti on the floor behind an overturned table. He shifted his weight, looking down at her with those pale gray eyes that now held something new. Surprise, calculation, and perhaps the faintest hint of respect. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. Emma couldn't answer. She was shaking too hard, her breath coming in rapid gasps that bordered on hyperventilation. The gun had fallen from her grip and lay on the floor beside them, and she couldn't stop staring at it, at what she'd done with it. She'd shot someone, actually shot a person. She'd pulled the trigger and watched him fall and, "Breathe," Moretti commanded, his voice cutting through her spiraling panic. "Slowly. In through your nose, out through your mouth, that's it." She followed his instructions without thinking, her body responding to the absolute certainty in his tone. Gradually, her breathing slowed. Her vision cleared. The ringing in her ears faded enough that she could hear shouting outside. Car doors slamming, boots pounding on pavement. Moretti stood wincing slightly, and Emma saw blood spreading across his left side where a bullet had grazed him. But he moved with the same controlled grace as before, apparently unconcerned with his injury. He offered her his hand. Emma stared at it for a long moment, recognizing that taking it meant something, meant crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But what choice did she have? Her palm was already stained with gun residue. Her fingerprints were on the weapon. The entire restaurant had seen what she'd done. She took his hand. His grip was firm, steady, pulling her to her feet with effortless strength. "Listen to me carefully," Moretti said, his voice low and urgent as the police sirens grew deafening outside. "You just saved my life. That makes you either the bravest or the stupidest person I've ever met, and I haven't decided which yet." He paused, his eyes searching her face. "But what you definitely are now is a target. The men who came here tonight, they won't forget what you did, do you understand?" Emma nodded mutely, though understanding felt miles away. "Good." Moretti reached into his jacket. Emma flinched, but he only pulled out a business card, pressing it into her palm. "When this is over, when the police are done with you, call that number. Don't go home. Don't go anywhere familiar. Just call." "I don't," Emma started, but her voice cracked. "I don't understand what just happened." Something that might have been sympathy flickered across Moretti's face. "You stepped into a world that doesn't forgive mistakes. But you also," he hesitated, as if the words were unfamiliar. "You did something extraordinary. Something I won't forget." The front doors burst open. Police officers flooded into the restaurant, weapons drawn, shouting commands that blurred together into incomprehensible noise. Emma saw them spreading out, securing the scene, checking the fallen men. Moretti's hand dropped from her shoulder. "Remember what I said. Call that number. I promise you, Emma Sullivan, you're going to need the help." How did he know her last name? She'd only told him Emma, but there was no time to ask. More men in dark suits were pouring through the kitchen entrance, and these moved with the same predatory grace as Moretti's fallen bodyguards. They surrounded him immediately, already pulling him toward a back exit that Emma hadn't known existed. Moretti looked back once as they hustled him away, his pale eyes locked with hers across the demolished restaurant, and in them she saw something that made her blood run cold. Certainty, the absolute knowledge that this wasn't over, that tonight had tied their fates together in ways she couldn't begin to comprehend. Then he was gone, vanished into whatever shadows powerful men disappeared into when the world fell apart. "Ma'am, I need you to put your hands where I can see them." The voice was female, calm but commanding. Emma turned to find herself facing an Asian woman in her 40s, wearing a badge that identified her as Detective Sarah Chen, NYPD. Emma raised her hands, still shaking, and felt something papery brush against her palm. The business card. She closed her fist around it instinctively, hiding it from view. "I'm Emma Sullivan," she heard herself say, her voice sounding distant and strange. "I work here. I'm just a waitress." I didn't mean to." "It's okay," Detective Chen said gently, though her eyes were sharp, missing nothing. "We're going to sort this all out, but first, I need you to come with me. We have a lot of questions, and something tells me you have quite a story to tell." As Chen led her toward the front doors, Emma caught sight of herself in one of the restaurant's ornate mirrors. She looked like a stranger, hair wild, white shirt stained with wine and blood, eyes too wide and shocked. But it was her hands that drew her attention, still trembling even as they hung at her sides. These hands had pulled a trigger, had stopped a heart from beating, had saved the life of a man she didn't know, and probably shouldn't have protected. Outside, the November rain continued to fall, mixing with the flashing red and blue lights of a dozen police cars. News vans were already pulling up, cameras emerging like predators scenting blood. Emma saw Maria being led to an ambulance, Michael talking rapidly to a uniformed officer, other staff members and diners giving statements in clusters along the sidewalk. This was real. This had actually happened. And as a plainclothes officer wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and guided her toward a waiting squad car, Emma made a decision. She wouldn't look at the card yet, wouldn't acknowledge its existence until she was alone and could think clearly. But she wouldn't throw it away either, because Dante Moretti had been right about one thing. She had stepped into a world that didn't forgive mistakes, and whether she liked it or not, whether it was fair or not, her life had changed irrevocably the moment she'd grabbed that gun. The night everything changed was just beginning. 48 hours after the shooting, Emma's life had become unrecognizable. She sat on the edge of a sagging mattress in a motel room in Queens, staring at her phone as it buzzed for the 17th time that morning. Another unknown number. Another reporter, probably. Or maybe just someone who'd seen her face plastered across every news outlet in the city and wanted to offer their unsolicited opinion about what she'd done. The phone went to voicemail. Emma didn't bother listening to the message. The room around her was exactly what $49 a night could buy. Water-stained ceiling tiles, carpet that had once been beige but was now an indeterminate gray, and a bathroom where she kept her shoes on even in the shower. The neon sign outside, Starlight Motel, though half the letters had burned out years ago, cast a flickering red glow through the thin curtains. It was the 5th motel she'd stayed in since leaving the police station 2 nights ago. She'd learned quickly that staying in one place was dangerous. Emma's face was everywhere. "Waitress becomes hero in Manhattan restaurant incident," read one headline. "Who is Emma Sullivan?" asked another, accompanied by a photo someone had pulled from her Facebook, her at her father's bedside last year, both of them smiling despite everything, neither knowing it would be one of their last pictures together. She'd deleted all her social media accounts within 6 hours of the shooting. It hadn't mattered. The internet never forgot, and apparently neither did the 24-hour news cycle. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a number she recognized. Detective Sarah Chen. Emma hesitated, then answered. "Hello? Emma, it's Detective Chen. How are you holding up?" The concern in Chen's voice sounded genuine, but Emma had learned in the past 2 days that everyone wanted something from her. "I'm fine," Emma lied. "Where are you staying? I'd like to come by and check on you, maybe go over your statement one more time." Emma glanced at the door, checking for the 3rd time that the chain lock was secure. "I'm safe. That's all you need to know." A pause on the other end of the line. "Emma, I'm worried about you. What happened at Castello Venetian? You did the right thing. You saved lives. But there are people who might not see it that way." "What people?" Emma asked, though she already knew the answer. "The man you..." The man who was injured works for the Calabrese family. They're a significant organized crime organization with operations throughout the city. We've been trying to build a case against them for years. Chen's voice dropped lower. They're going to want revenge, Emma. Against you and against Dante Moretti. Emma's hand tightened on the phone. She'd spent the past 2 days researching everything she could find about Dante Moretti and the Calabrese family, piecing together a picture of the world she'd stumbled into. The Morettis controlled the docks in Brooklyn and parts of the construction industry. The Calabreses ran gambling operations and had their hands in legitimate businesses throughout Manhattan. The two families had been rivals for decades, ever since some dispute over territory that no one outside their circles fully understood, and she'd put herself directly in the middle of their war. I'm being careful, Emma said. Careful isn't enough. We can offer you protection. In exchange for what? Testifying against Moretti? Emma stood up, pacing the narrow space between the bed and the wall. I've read the news, detective. I know what you're building. You want me to say that Moretti's bodyguards fired first, that they were carrying illegal weapons, that he was meeting with known criminals, weren't they? Chen's voice held a challenge now. Emma, Dante Moretti is not a good man. He runs a criminal organization responsible for extortion, money laundering, and worse. The fact that someone tried to take him out doesn't make him innocent, and the fact that you saved his life doesn't make you obligated to protect him. Emma closed her eyes. She'd been having this argument with herself for 2 days straight. I know what I saw. Men came into that restaurant planning to shoot everyone at that table. I reacted, that's all. And the business card? Chen asked quietly. The one you had in your hand when we brought you in? The one you claimed you found on the floor? Emma's pulse quickened. She'd hidden the card in her sock before Chen had seen it clearly, claiming it was just something she'd grabbed during the chaos. It was nothing. Just a card from the restaurant. Right. Chen didn't sound convinced. Look, Emma, I'm going to be straight with you. The Calabrese family knows who you are. They know where you worked, where you lived, who your friends are. Anthony Calabrese, Sal's son, has already been making inquiries. If Moretti or his people haven't contacted you yet, they will. And when they do, I need you to call me immediately. Why would they contact me? Because you saved Dante Moretti's life, which means you're either an asset or a liability to him. Either way, he's not going to ignore you. Chen paused. Has he reached out? Emma thought about the business card, currently tucked into the inner pocket of her jacket, the embossed number she'd memorized but hadn't called. No. Another pause. Longer this time. You're a terrible liar, Emma, but I can't force you to accept our help. Just be careful. And when things go bad, and they will go bad, call me, day or night. The line went dead. Emma tossed her phone onto the bed and walked to the window, carefully pulling back the edge of the curtain to look outside. The motel parking lot was mostly empty. A few beat-up cars, a pickup truck with a missing tailgate, and a motorcycle that had been there when she checked in. Nothing obviously suspicious. But then she wouldn't recognize suspicious if she saw it, would she? She was a waitress, not a detective. She had no idea what professional surveillance looked like or how to tell if someone was following her. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since yesterday. The protein bar she'd bought from a bodega that morning was long gone. She needed real food, but that meant leaving the room, being visible, risking. A knock at the door made her jump so violently she nearly tripped over her own feet. Emma froze, heart hammering. No one knew she was here. She'd paid cash, used a fake name, specifically chosen a place that didn't ask questions. No one should be knocking on her door. The knock came again, harder this time. Miss Sullivan? I know you're in there. The voice was male, calm, with an accent she couldn't place. Vaguely European maybe. Not threatening exactly, but absolutely confident. The voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Emma looked around the room frantically. The window didn't open far enough to climb through. The bathroom had no exterior exit. She was trapped. I'm not here to hurt you, the voice continued. My name is Marcus Vitale. I work for Mr. Moretti. He sent me to check on your well-being. Emma's breath caught. She moved closer to the door, staying to the side in case whoever was out there decided to shoot through it. How did you find me? Miss Sullivan, if you could find 5 different motels to hide in over the past 2 days, did you really think we couldn't track you to this one? A hint of amusement colored his tone. You used your debit card at a bodega 3 blocks from here this morning. We've been monitoring your accounts. Of course they had. Emma felt stupid for not realizing sooner. She had maybe $300 in cash left, After that, she'd have to use her card again, leaving a trail that apparently anyone could follow. "What do you want?" she called through the door. "To talk. 5 minutes of your time and then I'll leave if you want me to. You have my word." "The word of a criminal?" Emma shot back. "The word of someone who understands the danger you're in better than you do." Marcus's voice hardened slightly. "The Calabrese family has put a price on your head, Ms. Sullivan. $25,000 to anyone who can deliver you to them. Every two-bit thug in the city knows your face now, knows you're alone and unprotected. How long do you think you can keep running on your own?" Emma's legs felt weak. She sank down to sit with her back against the door, hugging her knees to her chest. $25,000. That was more than most people in her old neighborhood made in a year. How many desperate people would jump at that opportunity? "I'll call the police," she said, but it sounded weak even to her own ears. "And tell them what? That organized crime figures are looking for you? They already know. Detective Chen told you as much, didn't she?" Marcus paused. "The police can't protect you, Ms. Sullivan. They don't have the resources to provide round-the-clock security for a witness who hasn't even agreed to testify. At best, they'll put you in a safe house for a few days, then expect you to disappear into witness protection, which means abandoning your entire life, your friends, your future. Is that what you want?" Emma didn't answer. She'd already considered witness protection and rejected it. Starting over with a new identity, in some random city far from everything she'd ever known, giving up on nursing school and the life she'd been fighting so hard to build, it felt like letting the Calabreses win without them even having to find her. "Mr. Moretti is offering you another option," Marcus continued. "His protection in exchange for your cooperation." "Cooperation with what?" "That's a conversation for Mr. Moretti to have with you directly. But I can tell you this much. You'll be safe. You'll be compensated for your time, and when this is over, you'll be able to return to your normal life. That's more than the police are offering." Emma wanted to laugh at the phrase normal life. That ship had sailed the moment she picked up that gun. But maybe Marcus had a point. Maybe the only way out was through, and the Morettis at least had a vested interest in keeping her alive. "If I open this door," she said slowly, "and I don't like what you have to say, I can tell you to leave and you'll go. You have my word." Emma stood up, took a deep breath, and unlocked the door. She kept the chain engaged, opening it just wide enough to see the man on the other side. Marcus Vitali was in his 50s, with iron gray hair combed back from a deeply lined face. He wore an expensive suit despite the dreary Queen setting, and carried himself with the same quiet authority she'd seen in Moretti. His eyes, dark brown, almost black, assessed her with professional interest but no apparent hostility. "May I come in?" he asked politely. Every instinct Emma had screamed at her to say no, to slam the door and call Detective Chen immediately. But another part of her, the practical part that had learned to survive on her own after her father passed, recognized that Marcus was right. She couldn't run forever. She needed help, and her options for where to find it were extremely limited. She unhooked the chain and stepped back. Marcus entered the room, closing the door behind him with a quiet click. He looked around with barely concealed distaste, taking in the stained carpet and peeling wallpaper. "This is unacceptable. You saved Mr. Moretti's life, and you're living in this." "It's what I can afford," Emma said defensively. "Not anymore." Marcus reached into his jacket. Emma tensed, but he only pulled out a thick envelope. "There's $10,000 in cash here. Consider it a down payment on Mr. Moretti's gratitude. Use it to find somewhere safer to stay. Somewhere with actual security." Emma stared at the envelope like it might explode. "I can't accept that." "Why not? You're in this situation because you helped Mr. Moretti. The least he can do is ensure you're not sleeping in a place with bedbugs and mold. Because accepting money from him means I owe him something, and I don't want to owe Dante Moretti anything." Emma met Marcus's eyes. "I'm not stupid. I know what he is. What you are. What we are," Marcus repeated thoughtfully. He set the envelope on the dresser, then moved to the room's single chair, a rickety thing with a torn vinyl seat, and sat down. "Let me tell you what we are, Ms. Sullivan. We're people who understand loyalty, who honor our debts and who protect those under our care. Mr. Moretti doesn't forget kindness, and he certainly doesn't forget when someone saves his life. And he doesn't forget insults either, I'm guessing," Emma said. A slight smile crossed Marcus's face. "No, he doesn't. Which is why the Calabrese family is currently scrambling to find you before we do. You humiliated them, Ms. Sullivan. You cost them one of their best people, ruined their carefully planned operation, and did it in front of witnesses and security cameras. Anthony Calabrese, Sal's son, is particularly eager to make an example of you. Emma wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the stuffy room. What does Moretti want from me? Your trust eventually, your cooperation, immediately, and most importantly, your safety, because if something happens to you, it reflects poorly on him. In our world, protecting those who help us is a matter of honor. Honor among criminals, Emma said bitterly. We prefer to think of it as honor among those who understand how the real world works. Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious. I'm not going to lie to you and pretend we're good people, Ms. Sullivan. We're not. We operate outside the law. We settle disputes in ways that would horrify ordinary citizens. And yes, we've all done things we're not proud of. But we also have rules, codes, lines we don't cross. Like what? You don't hurt women? You don't target innocent people? Emma shook her head. I've seen enough mob movies to know how this story ends. This isn't a movie, Marcus said flatly. If it were, you'd already be gone. The Calabreses would have found you on day one and we'd be having a very different conversation. Or more likely, we wouldn't be having one at all. He paused, letting that sink in. The fact that you're still alive right now is because Mr. Moretti has had people watching you since you left the police station. Do you really think it's coincidence that no one's approached you yet? That despite your face being all over the news, despite the price on your head, you've been perfectly safe? Emma's stomach dropped. You've been following me? Protecting you, Marcus corrected. There's a difference. Without my permission, without even telling me. Emma felt violation and relief warring inside her. You had no right. We had every right. You saved Mr. Moretti's life. That creates an obligation, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. Marcus stood up, his tone becoming more formal. Now, you have a choice to make, Ms. Sullivan. You can continue running, continue hiding in places like this, continue pretending that you can handle this situation on your own. Eventually, you'll make a mistake. Use your card in the wrong place. Stay too long in one location. Trust the wrong person. And when you do, the Calabreses will be there. He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. Or you can accept that you're already involved in something bigger than yourself, and let the people with experience handle it. Mr. Moretti has arranged a safe house in Brooklyn. Comfortable, secure, with people who know what they're doing watching over you. All you have to do is say yes. Emma looked at the envelope on the dresser, then back at Marcus. And if I say no, then we'll continue watching from a distance doing what we can to keep you safe. But our resources aren't unlimited, Ms. Sullivan. Sooner or later, something will slip through the cracks. He opened the door, letting in the sound of traffic from the street beyond. The card Mr. Moretti gave you has a number on it. Call it when you're ready to make the smart choice. Don't wait too long. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Emma stood frozen in the middle of the room, her mind racing. She walked to the window and carefully looked out, watching as Marcus crossed the parking lot to a black sedan with tinted windows. The car pulled away smoothly, disappearing into the afternoon traffic. But in the parking lot, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. A dark SUV parked in the far corner, positioned with a clear view of her motel room door. As she watched, another man walked casually past her window. Just a guy in jeans and a jacket. Could be anyone, except for the way his eyes flicked toward her door, cataloging, assessing. They were still watching, had been watching this entire time. Emma let the curtain fall back into place and sank onto the bed. The envelope sat on the dresser like a challenge. $10,000. Enough to solve her immediate problems, to buy her time and options and safety. All she had to do was accept it. Accept that she was in Dante Moretti's debt. Accept that her normal life was over, at least for now. Accept that sometimes the only way to survive was to make deals with people you'd normally cross the street to avoid. Emma pulled out her phone and stared at it for a long moment. Detective Chen's number was there, just one call away. So was the card Marcus had mentioned, with Moretti's private line. Two choices. Two very different paths. She thought about her father, about what he would tell her to do. He'd been a good man, honest and hard-working, the kind of person who believed in the system and following the rules. But he'd also been practical. He'd taught her that surviving sometimes meant making difficult choices, compromising your ideals for the sake of living to fight another day. "I'm sorry, Dad," Emma whispered to the empty room. Then she pulled Dante Moretti's business card from her jacket pocket and began to dial. The safe house in Brooklyn was nothing like Emma had expected. She'd imagined something dark and claustrophobic, a basement apartment with barred windows and the constant smell of cigarette smoke. Instead, Marcus had driven her to a renovated brownstone in Park Slope, complete with original hardwood floors, exposed brick walls, and tall windows that flooded the space with afternoon light. "This is the safe house?" Emma had asked, standing in the doorway with her single bag of belongings. "Mr. Moretti believes that comfort and security aren't mutually exclusive," Marcus replied, leading her inside. "The windows are bulletproof glass. The doors are reinforced steel beneath the decorative facade, and there are cameras covering every approach to the building. You'll be perfectly safe here." That had been a week ago. 7 days of living in what felt like a very beautiful cage. Emma sat at the kitchen island now, nursing her third cup of coffee and watching the morning light paint patterns across the marble countertop. The brownstone was quiet except for the distant sounds of the city beyond its walls. Traffic, voices, the normal rhythm of Brooklyn waking up. Inside, she might as well have been alone. Except she wasn't. She was never alone anymore. 2 of Moretti's men were always present, rotating shifts every 12 hours. They were polite, professional, and absolutely uninterested in conversation beyond the basics. One stayed on the ground floor, monitoring the security cameras. The other positioned himself outside her bedroom door at night, a silent reminder that she was as much a prisoner as she was a protected guest. Emma understood the necessity. The news hadn't moved on from the Castello Venetian incident. If anything, coverage had intensified. More details had emerged about the Calabresi family's operations, about Dante Moretti's business empire, about the decades-long rivalry that had exploded into violence that night. Emma's face remained a fixture on every news channel, with talking heads debating whether she was a hero or simply someone in the wrong place at the wrong time. The Calabresis had responded to the coverage with silence, which Detective Chen had told her, in one of their daily check-in calls, that Emma suspected were being monitored, was somehow worse than public threats. Silent organizations were planning organizations, Chen had said. They were waiting for the right moment. Emma's phone buzzed on the counter. Another text from Lisa, her best friend and former co-worker at the Hell's Kitchen diner. The messages had started hopeful and concerned, gradually shifting to confusion, then hurt, and now, a week of mostly unanswered texts later, anger. "Where are you? I've been to your apartment 3 times. Did you just disappear? Are you even alive? Call me." Emma's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She wanted to respond, wanted to explain, wanted to maintain at least one connection to her old life. But Marcus had been clear. No contact with anyone from before. Every connection was a potential security risk, a thread the Calabresis could pull to find her. She set the phone down without responding, and immediately hated herself for it. "You should eat something." The voice came from behind her, making Emma turn. Tony, one of her regular guards, early 30s with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, stood in the kitchen doorway holding a bag from a local bakery. "Can't live on coffee alone." "I'm not hungry," Emma said, which was true. She'd barely eaten in days. Her stomach twisted into knots of anxiety and frustration. Tony set the bag on the counter anyway. "Fresh cornetti from that Italian place on 5th Avenue. Mr. Moretti's favorite." He paused, then added more quietly, "He's coming by today. You should eat something before he gets here." Emma's pulse quickened. "Moretti's coming here?" "Around 11. Said he wants to talk to you." Tony's expression remained neutral, but Emma caught something in his tone. Was it sympathy? Concern? "You've been here a week. Makes sense he'd want to check in." After Tony left, Emma forced herself to eat one of the pastries. It was delicious, flaky, buttery, filled with sweet custard, but it sat like lead in her stomach. She'd been in this house for 7 days and hadn't seen Dante Moretti once. Part of her had started to wonder if the man from the restaurant had been real, or just some fever dream conjured by trauma and adrenaline, but he was coming today, and Emma needed to be ready. She went upstairs to her room, spacious, beautifully furnished with a view of the tree-lined street below, and stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror. She'd lost weight she couldn't afford to lose, and dark circles had taken up permanent residence under her eyes. Her hair needed washing, and the clothes Marcus had provided, expensive casual wear that fit perfectly, because of course they'd known her size, hung loosely on her frame. She looked like a ghost of herself. Emma forced herself through a shower, then dressed carefully in jeans and a soft gray sweater. She dried her hair and even applied a little makeup, some remnant of pride demanding she not look completely defeated when facing the man who'd turned her life upside down. At exactly 11 o'clock, she heard the sound of multiple vehicles pulling up outside. Emma moved to the window, careful to stay behind the curtain, and watched as 3 black SUVs parked in front of the brownstone. Men in suits emerged first, scanning the street with practiced vigilance. Then Dante Moretti stepped out of the middle vehicle. He looked different in daylight, somehow more real and less like the dangerous figure from her memories. He wore dark slacks and a charcoal sweater, no jacket despite the November chill. As he approached the door, he glanced up at Emma's window, directly at her hiding spot, as if he'd known exactly where she'd be. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second before Emma jerked back from the curtain, heart pounding. She heard the front door open, heard Marcus's voice greeting Moretti, heard footsteps on the stairs. Emma stood in the middle of her room, hands clasped to keep them from shaking as a knock sounded on her door. "Ms. Sullivan, may I come in?" Moretti's voice, quiet and formal, exactly as she remembered. Emma took a breath and opened the door. He stood in her doorway, and this close she was struck again by his youth. The news had reported his age, 32, but the weight of authority he carried made him seem older. His pale gray eyes studied her with the same intense focus from the restaurant, taking in details she couldn't hide: her weight loss, her exhaustion, the barely concealed fear she felt standing this close to him. "You look terrible," he said bluntly. Emma almost laughed at the directness. "Thank you, you look great too." A hint of a smile crossed his face. "May I?" He gestured to the room. Emma stepped back, letting him enter. Moretti moved to the window, looking out at the street below where his men maintained their vigil. He was quiet for a long moment, and Emma found herself studying him in profile. The sharp line of his jaw, the slight tension in his shoulders, the way he held himself with complete certainty even in stillness. "I've been told you're not eating," he said finally, not looking at her. "That you barely sleep, that you spend most of your time staring at your phone but never actually making calls. Are your men reporting on everything I do?" "Of course they are. Your safety is their primary responsibility." Now he turned to face her. "But keeping you alive isn't enough if you're going to waste away from misery. This house is meant to be a refuge, not a prison." "Funny," Emma said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "It feels a lot like a prison. Beautiful bars are still bars." Moretti was quiet for a moment, considering her words. Then he moved to one of the chairs by the window and sat down, gesturing for Emma to take the other. She remained standing. "Sit," he said, and it wasn't quite a command, but it wasn't a suggestion either. Emma sat, mostly because her legs were shaking and she didn't want him to see. "I owe you my life," Moretti began, his voice measured and careful. "That's not a debt I take lightly. In my world, such an obligation is sacred. It demands repayment, protection, loyalty. Do you understand?" "I understand that I made a split-second decision that I didn't think through," Emma replied. "I didn't do it expecting anything from you. I didn't even know who you were, which makes it more remarkable, not less." He leaned forward slightly. "Most people would have stayed hidden, would have let events unfold and told themselves it wasn't their problem. But you acted. You stepped into danger to protect a stranger. That takes either tremendous courage or tremendous stupidity, and I don't think you're stupid." Emma looked away, uncomfortable with his intensity. "I'm not brave either. I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it." Moretti paused. "Emma, may I call you Emma?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Emma, the situation you find yourself in is complicated. The Calabrese family wants revenge, which puts you in constant danger. The police want you to testify, which would place you in a different kind of danger, and He trailed off, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I need to understand why you helped me before I can determine how to help you. I told you. I didn't think. I just reacted." "No." His voice sharpened. "That's the answer you've been giving the police. The answer you've probably been telling yourself. But I don't believe it. I've seen the security footage from the restaurant, Emma. I've watched that moment a dozen times. You had at least 3 seconds between grabbing the weapon and firing. 3 seconds where you could have stayed hidden, could have done nothing. But you chose to act. Why?" Emma felt her throat tighten. She'd been avoiding this question even in her own mind because the answer frightened her. "I don't know." "Yes, you do." "I don't." The words came out sharper than she intended. "Maybe I saw my father in you, okay? Maybe in that split second I saw someone about to lose their life the way my dad lost his, and I couldn't just watch it happen again. Maybe it was trauma response or adrenaline or just pure stupidity like you said. But I don't have some grand explanation for you. I couldn't let you die. The words hung in the air between them. Moretti's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Your father, he said quietly. Marcus told me he passed away recently. Cancer? Emma nodded, not trusting herself to speak. And you were with him? At the end? Every day. Emma's voice cracked. I watched him get weaker and weaker. Watched him fight and lose and finally give up. I held his hand when he took his last breath and I couldn't do anything to stop it. I was completely helpless. So when you had the chance to stop someone else from losing that fight, you took it. It wasn't a question, but Emma answered anyway. I guess so. Moretti leaned back in his chair, studying her with those unsettling pale eyes. You saved my life because you couldn't save your father's. That's not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. Ambition, perhaps. Self-preservation instinct. Maybe I thought you recognized an opportunity and seized it, calculating that a crime boss would owe you a significant debt. He shook his head slowly. But you're not calculating at all, are you? You're just genuinely good, which is extraordinarily rare in my world. Emma didn't know how to respond to that, so she said nothing. Moretti stood up and moved back to the window. I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully. The attack at Castello Venetian wasn't just about the Calabreses trying to take me out. It was more complicated than that. What do you mean? There was someone inside my organization feeding information to the Calabreses. Someone who knew where I'd be that night, who I'd be with, what security I'd have. His voice remained calm, but Emma could hear the anger beneath it. Someone close to me betrayed me, and I need to find out who. Emma's chest tightened. What does that have to do with me? Everything. Moretti turned to face her. You're an outsider with no connections to either family, no history with any of us. You're also observant. I could see it at the restaurant, the way you were watching everything, noticing details. And most importantly, you're someone I can trust, because you have absolutely nothing to gain from my death. You want me to help you find a traitor? Emma stood up, backing away. Are you insane? I'm a waitress, not some kind of investigator. I don't know anything about your world. Exactly. Which is why you'll see things my own people would miss. They're too close to it, too embedded in the politics and alliances. Moretti moved toward her, not threatening, but intent. I'm asking for your help, Emma. Not as an employee or an asset, but as someone I'm hoping can become an ally. And if I say no, then I'll continue protecting you, continue providing everything you need until the situation resolves itself. But I think you already know that hiding here indefinitely isn't sustainable. You'll go mad with boredom and isolation within a month. He paused. This is an opportunity. Help me identify the traitor, and I'll give you something in return. What could you possibly give me that I want? Your life back. Moretti's voice was quiet, but certain. The Calabreses won't stop hunting you until they've extracted revenge. But if we can eliminate their leadership, expose the corruption in their organization, hand enough evidence to the authorities to dismantle them, you'll be safe. You can go back to your apartment, your friends, your nursing school dreams. You can have the future you were building before all this happened. Emma wanted to laugh at how impossible that sounded. But looking at Moretti's expression, she realized he believed it. He actually thought he could deliver on that promise. How? She asked. How would I even help you with this? There's a meeting tomorrow night. My inner circle, the people I trust most. I want you there observing. You'll be introduced as someone under my protection, someone important to me. Watch how they react. Watch their interactions. Tell me what you see. They'll know I don't belong. Of course they will. That's the point. Moretti moved closer, close enough that Emma had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. A disruption reveals cracks, Emma. People who are comfortable get uncomfortable. People who are hiding something make mistakes. This is insane, Emma whispered. Yes, Moretti agreed. But you're already involved. The only question is whether you're going to be passive or active in determining how this ends. Emma thought about the past week, about the suffocating boredom and fear of hiding, thought about her deleted social media accounts, her unanswered text messages, her life on pause while she waited for someone else to fix everything, thought about her father, who'd always told her that the worst thing you could do was give up control of your own story. If I do this, she said slowly, I need something from you first. Name it. The truth. Not the version you tell your associates or the police or whoever else. I want to know who you really are, what you really do. Because if I'm going to step into your world, I need to understand what I'm walking into. Moretti studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Fair enough, but the truth is complicated, and some of it you won't like hearing. I already don't like any of this. A genuine smile crossed his face, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his entire appearance, making him look younger and somehow more dangerous. That's fair. All right, Emma Sullivan. You want the truth? Let's go downstairs, I'll tell you everything. They sat in the Brownstones' living room, Emma on the leather couch and Moretti in an armchair across from her. Marcus had brought coffee and then disappeared, leaving them alone except for the distant presence of guards stationed throughout the house. I was 10 years old, Moretti began without preamble, when I realized my family wasn't normal. Other kids' fathers worked in offices or construction. Mine worked from home, had strange men visiting at odd hours, and carried a weapon everywhere he went. Emma listened, coffee cup warming her hands, as Moretti's story unfolded. His father, Alessandro Moretti, had built a business empire that operated in the gray spaces between legal and illegal, construction companies that won bids through intimidation, dock unions controlled through strategic pressure, protection services that were really just sophisticated extortion. Dante had been raised in that world, groomed from childhood to eventually take over. I thought I could change it, Moretti said, staring into his coffee. When my father died 6 years ago, heart attack, nothing dramatic, I inherited everything. I told myself I'd legitimize the operation, transition into fully legal businesses over time. But it's not that simple. Why not? Emma asked. Because the people who work for you expect certain things. Because your rivals see any weakness as an opportunity. Because once you're in this world, there's no clean exit. He looked up at her. I've reduced the violence, eliminated some of our more objectionable operations. But I can't simply walk away without everything collapsing, potentially into the hands of people much worse than me. That sounds like rationalization, Emma said quietly. It is, Moretti agreed without hesitation. I rationalize my choices every day. Tell myself I'm better than the alternative, that I'm protecting people who depend on me, that I'm working towards something better, even if I never quite reach it. But the truth is simpler. I'm trapped by choices I made, and choices made for me before I was old enough to understand what they meant. Emma absorbed this, trying to reconcile it with the dangerous crime boss from the news reports. And the Calabreses? They're everything I'm trying not to be. Sal Calabrese runs his organization through fear and brutality. He controls gambling, loan sharking, other operations that destroy lives. We've been rivals for years because our territories overlap and our philosophies conflict. Moretti's expression hardened. The attack at the restaurant was supposed to end that conflict by taking me out of the equation. But someone on your side helped plan it? Yes. Someone who either wants my position or has been bought by the Calabreses. Either way, they're willing to see me gone. He set down his coffee cup. That's the world you're stepping into if you agree to help me. Dangerous, morally complicated, and with no guarantee of a happy ending. Emma was quiet for a long time, processing everything she'd heard. Finally, she asked, Why me? You must have dozens of people who could do what you're asking. Why involve someone who has no experience, no connections, no skills for this? Because of exactly that, Moretti said. Everyone else in my world has an agenda. You're the first person I've met in years who wants nothing from me except to survive and get back to your normal life. That makes you the only person I can trust completely. He stood up, moving to look out the window at the quiet Brooklyn street. Tomorrow night there will be a dinner. My Uncle Vincent, my oldest friend Tony, my advisor Father Russo, and a few others. All people I've known for years, any one of whom could be the traitor. I need you there watching them with fresh eyes. Will you do it? Emma thought about everything she'd lose by saying yes. Her illusions of safety, her moral high ground, her ability to pretend she wasn't already deeply involved in this situation. Then she thought about what she'd lose by saying no. Agency, purpose, and any real chance of reclaiming her future. I'll do it, she said. But I have conditions. Name them. First, I want Detective Chen to know I'm safe. You can monitor the call, but I need to contact her so she stops thinking I've been taken against my will. Moretti nodded. Agreed. Second, when this is over, if we actually survive and manage to identify your traitor, you help me disappear for real. New city, clean slate, no connections to any of this. I can do better than that. I'll ensure you can finish nursing school wherever you want, with all expenses covered. Emma blinked, surprised by the offer. Why would you do that? Because debts should be repaid with interest and you saved my life. Moretti's voice was matter of fact. Is there a third condition? Yes. Emma met his eyes directly. No one gets hurt because of me. If my involvement puts innocent people in danger, we stop immediately. I won't be responsible for casualties. Something flickered in Moretti's expression. Respect, perhaps, or sadness. I can't promise that no one will be hurt, but I can promise that we'll do everything possible to minimize harm. Is that acceptable? It wasn't. Not really. But it was the best she was going to get. Okay, Emma said. I'm in. Moretti crossed the room and extended his hand. Emma stood and shook it, his grip firm and surprisingly warm. This was it, she realized. The moment she stopped being a victim of circumstances and became an active participant in her own fate. She just hoped she wasn't making a terrible mistake. The dinner is tomorrow at 7, Moretti said. Marcus will bring you appropriate clothing and brief you on who will be there. Until then, try to rest. You're going to need your strength. He moved toward the door, then paused. Emma, thank you for saving my life at the restaurant and for agreeing to help me now. I won't forget either. Then he was gone, leaving Emma alone with her thoughts and the weight of what she'd just agreed to do. Outside, the Brooklyn afternoon continued its normal rhythm. Children playing, people walking dogs, the gentle chaos of ordinary life. Emma watched it all from her window and wondered if she'd ever find her way back to that kind of simplicity. Probably not. But at least now she was moving forward instead of just hiding and hoping for rescue. And maybe, just maybe, she could help end this before anyone else got hurt, even if the person most likely to get hurt was herself. Emma stood in front of the full-length mirror, barely recognizing herself. The dress Marcus had delivered that afternoon was elegant but understated, a deep navy that brought out her eyes, with a modest neckline and sleeves that ended just above her elbows. It fit perfectly, tailored to measurements she hadn't provided but that someone had clearly obtained. Her hair had been styled by a woman who'd arrived with a bag full of professional equipment, creating soft waves that framed her face. Even minimal makeup made her look polished, sophisticated, like someone who belonged in Dante Moretti's world. She looked like someone she wasn't. You look beautiful, Marcus said from the doorway, his tone respectful but businesslike. Mr. Moretti will be pleased. Emma turned away from her reflection. I don't care about pleasing him. I just want to get through tonight without making a fool of myself. You won't. Marcus entered the room, carrying a small jewelry box. But you need to understand something before we leave. The people you're about to meet, they're dangerous. Not in the obvious way, with threats and violence. They're dangerous because they've survived decades in a world where trust is currency and betrayal is common. They'll be evaluating you, trying to determine why Mr. Moretti has brought you into his inner circle. What should I tell them? Nothing. Let Mr. Moretti explain your presence. Your job is simply to observe. Marcus opened the jewelry box, revealing a delicate silver necklace with a small pendant. May I? Emma nodded, turning so he could fasten it around her neck. The pendant was cool against her skin, a simple design that looked expensive without being ostentatious. This necklace has a recording device, Marcus said quietly. Mr. Moretti will be listening to everything that's said tonight. If you feel uncomfortable or threatened at any point, touch the pendant and say the word, headache. We'll extract you immediately. Emma's hand went instinctively to the pendant. You're saying this could be dangerous. I'm saying we're taking precautions. There's a difference. Marcus stepped back, evaluating her appearance with a critical eye. Remember, you're there as Mr. Moretti's guest under his protection. No one will harm you directly, but they may try to intimidate you, test you, see how you react under pressure. Great, Emma muttered. And I'm supposed to be observing them while they're observing me? Exactly. Now let's go over the key players one more time. For the next 20 minutes, Marcus reviewed the dossiers Emma had studied all afternoon. Vincent Moretti, Dante's uncle, the underboss who'd been with the organization for 40 years. Father Michael Russo, not actually Dante's biological father, but a priest who'd been the family's spiritual advisor and consigliere since before Dante was born. Tony Corelli, Dante's childhood friend, now a captain controlling several key operations. And 3 others, lieutenants who managed different aspects of the business. Any one of them could be the traitor. It's time, Marcus said, checking his watch. The car is waiting. The drive to the restaurant took 30 minutes, winding through Brooklyn toward an area Emma didn't recognize. They pulled up to a building that looked abandoned from the outside. Graffitied walls, boarded windows, a rusted sign that might have once advertised something. But when Marcus led her through a side entrance, Emma found herself in a completely different world. The interior had been transformed into an intimate dining space that looked like it belonged in a different era. Dark wood paneling, burgundy wallpaper, oil paintings of Italian countryside scenes. A single large table dominated the room, set with fine china and crystal glasses that caught the light from an elaborate chandelier overhead. Dante Moretti stood near the head of the table, dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. When Emma entered, his eyes swept over her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Approval, perhaps, mixed with something that might have been concern. "Emma," he said, moving forward to take her hand. His touch was formal, almost courtly. "You look lovely. Thank you for joining us tonight." "Did I have a choice?" Emma asked quietly, low enough that only he could hear. A slight smile touched his lips. "There's always a choice. You're here because you agreed to help me, not because I forced you." Before Emma could respond, voices sounded from another entrance. The first to enter was an older man in his 60s, with silver hair combed straight back and the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades making difficult decisions. He moved with the careful deliberation of someone whose body had accumulated old injuries. "Uncle Vincent," Moretti said, his tone warm but measured. "Thank you for coming." Vincent Moretti's eyes locked onto Emma immediately, assessing her with the sharp focus of a predator, identifying something new in its territory. "Dante, and who is this?" "This is Emma Sullivan. She's under my protection." Moretti's hand remained on Emma's elbow, a subtle claim of possession that made her skin prickle. "Emma, this is my Uncle Vincent. He's been with the family longer than I've been alive." Emma extended her hand, remembering Marcus's coaching. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Moretti." Vincent took her hand, his grip dry and firm. "Sullivan? Irish?" "Yes, sir. My father's family came from County Cork. And what brings an Irish girl into my nephew's world?" The question was casual, but Emma heard the steel beneath it. Before she could answer, Moretti intervened smoothly. "Emma did me a significant favor recently. I'm repaying the debt." Vincent's eyebrows rose fractionally. "The restaurant incident. I should have guessed." He released Emma's hand and turned to his nephew. "Bringing her here is either very smart or very stupid. I haven't decided which yet." "Neither have I," Moretti replied with perfect honesty. The others arrived in quick succession. Father Russo was younger than Emma expected, maybe 50, with dark hair graying at the temples and the kind face of someone accustomed to hearing confessions. Tony Corelli was handsome in a rough way, with bright eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. The three lieutenants, men whose names Emma immediately forgot in her nervousness, were harder to read, their expressions carefully neutral. They all stared at her. Emma felt like a specimen under glass, examined and categorized by experts who could spot weakness from across a room. "Please, everyone sit," Moretti said, gesturing to the table. He guided Emma to a seat on his right, a position of honor that she knew would not go unnoticed. Vincent took the seat on Moretti's left with Father Russo beside him. Tony sat directly across from Emma, his gaze never leaving her face. Wine was poured by silent waiters who appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Emma barely tasted hers, too focused on maintaining her composure. The first course arrived, some kind of pasta with seafood that she had to force herself to eat, each bite an effort against the knot in her stomach. The conversation started innocuously. Business updates, discussion of legitimate operations, talk of construction permits and union negotiations. Emma listened carefully, trying to identify anything that seemed off, any tension between the participants. But everyone was perfectly cordial, perfectly professional. Too perfect, maybe. "So, Miss Sullivan," Tony said during a lull in conversation, his voice friendly but his eyes sharp. "Dante tells us you're a nursing student. That's admirable work." "I'm trying to be," Emma replied carefully. "Current circumstances have put my education on hold. Current circumstances being that you shot someone to save my nephew's life." Tony's smile didn't reach his eyes. "That takes guts. Or desperation. Which was it?" Emma felt everyone's attention focus on her like a spotlight. She met Tony's gaze directly. "It was instinct. I saw someone about to be hurt, and I reacted. I didn't think about whether it was brave or desperate. I just acted." "Interesting." Tony leaned back in his chair. "Most people freeze in situations like that. The fact that you didn't makes me wonder about you, Miss Sullivan. What kind of person risks their life for a stranger?" "The kind who can't stand by and watch someone suffer," Emma said quietly. "My father died slowly and I couldn't do anything to stop it." Maybe I saw a chance to change an outcome for once, and I took it. The table went silent. Emma realized she'd revealed more than she intended, let emotion slip past her guard. But Father Russo nodded slowly, his expression sympathetic. Loss changes us, the priest said softly. It can make us either more compassionate or more hardened. You chose compassion. That's rare in our world. Our world? Emma asked before she could stop herself. Father, you're a priest. How does that fit with… She gestured vaguely around the table. All this? Vincent laughed, a harsh sound without humor. You think criminals don't need God, girl? I think that serving God and serving a crime organization might conflict, Emma said, then immediately regretted her bluntness. But Father Russo only smiled. You'd be surprised how often they align. I minister to people the church has forgotten, provide counsel when the law can't or won't help. Is that so different from your nursing ambitions? Helping those in need, regardless of who they are or what they've done? Emma had no answer to that. The logic was twisted, but she couldn't quite identify where. The main course arrived, veal that melted like butter, accompanied by vegetables Emma couldn't name. The conversation shifted to other topics, but Emma noticed something. Every few minutes, someone would glance at Vincent. A quick look, barely perceptible, but it happened repeatedly. Tony did it. So did one of the lieutenants. Even Father Russo, though his glances were more subtle. They were checking his reactions, she realized, waiting for some signal or approval. Emma touched her pendant casually, the gesture natural as she adjusted her necklace. Moretti needed to know about this pattern. Uncle, Moretti said, his voice cutting through a discussion about dock operations. You've been quiet tonight. What's your assessment of our position with the Calabrese situation? Vincent set down his wine glass with deliberate care. My assessment is that you're being reckless, Dante. First, you insist on dining in public despite intelligence suggesting a threat. Then you survive an attack only to bring the woman who saved you into our inner circle. He gestured toward Emma without looking at her. What exactly are you thinking? I'm thinking that someone told the Calabreses where I'd be that night, Moretti replied calmly. Someone with access to my schedule, my security arrangements, my habits. Someone at this table, perhaps. The atmosphere in the room transformed instantly. The lieutenants exchanged glances. Tony's hand moved beneath the table, toward a weapon, Emma realized with a spike of fear. Father Russo went very still, his expression unreadable. Vincent's face hardened. That's a serious accusation, nephew. It's a serious problem. Moretti's voice remained level, but Emma heard the danger beneath it. 7 men walked into that restaurant knowing exactly where I'd be sitting, exactly how many guards I'd have, exactly when to strike. That level of detail doesn't come from surveillance. It comes from inside information, or from sloppy security, Vincent countered. You've gotten comfortable, Dante. Arrogant. You think your reforms and legitimate businesses make you untouchable. But in our world, there's no such thing as safety, only vigilance. And you've been lacking that. Have I? Moretti leaned forward slightly. Or have I been giving potential traitors enough rope to hang themselves? Emma's heart hammered. This was escalating too quickly, moving toward confrontation she wasn't prepared for. She touched her pendant again, more deliberately this time, ready to say the code word if needed. Tony suddenly laughed, breaking the tension. Jesus, you two. Every family dinner turns into an interrogation. He looked at Emma with something like sympathy. Sorry, Miss Sullivan. You picked a hell of a night to meet everyone. Indeed, Father Russo added, his tone diplomatic. Perhaps we should remember that we're here to break bread together, not to accuse each other of betrayal. But Vincent wasn't finished. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. No, if Dante wants to make accusations, let him make them clearly. Who do you suspect, nephew? Me? Your oldest friend? The priest who baptized you? He spread his hands. Or maybe it's one of the lieutenant's men who've served this family for decades. Moretti remained seated, his composure absolute. I don't know yet, but I will find out. Will you? Vincent's voice dropped to something dangerous. And what will you do when you discover the truth? Will you have the stomach for what's necessary? Or will you hesitate like you always do, trying to find some compromise that lets you sleep at night? Emma saw Moretti's jaw tighten, the first crack in his calm facade. Careful, uncle. Or what? You'll have me removed? Investigated? Please. Vincent moved toward the door, then paused. Your father would be ashamed of what you've become, Dante. A businessman playing at being a mob boss, too soft to do what's required. The Calabreses know it. Your own people know it. And sooner or later, your weakness will destroy everything he built. The door slammed behind him, leaving shocked silence in his wake. Emma's hands were shaking under the table. That had been more than business disagreement. That had been open challenge, practically a declaration of war. And she'd witnessed it all, been present for what might have been the moment everything fell apart. I apologize, Moretti said quietly, addressing the remaining men. This wasn't how tonight was supposed to proceed. Vincent's always had a temper, Tony said, though he looked troubled. He'll cool down. Will he? Father Russo asked softly. Or has something changed? No one answered. The dinner concluded awkwardly, the remaining guests departing quickly. Soon only Emma and Moretti remained, sitting at opposite ends of the long table littered with half-empty plates and wine glasses. Well, Moretti said finally, pouring himself another glass of wine. That was enlightening. Your uncle practically confessed, Emma said, finding her voice. The way he talked about your father, about weakness. I know. Moretti's expression was unreadable. But suspecting and proving are different things. Vincent's been part of this organization since before I was born. Moving against him without absolute certainty would tear apart everything my father built. Emma stood up, her legs unsteady. What happens now? Now? Moretti looked at her with those pale gray eyes that seemed to see everything. Now we wait for him to make his next move, because he will. Tonight, forced his hand. And when he does, we'll be ready. Emma wanted to argue, to demand better answers, to insist this was over and she wanted out. But looking at Moretti's face, she knew it was too late for any of that. They were committed now. For better or worse, she was part of this until the end, whatever that end might be. 3 months had passed since the disastrous dinner, and Emma's life had settled into something that almost resembled normalcy. Almost. She sat in a lecture hall at Hunter College, her notebook open to a page filled with diagrams of the human cardiovascular system. Around her, other nursing students scribbled notes as Professor Martinez explained the intricacies of cardiac function. It was surreal. 6 months ago, Emma had been working double shifts just to keep her head above water. Now she was enrolled full-time in the nursing program she'd dreamed about, with all expenses covered by an anonymous benefactor, whose identity everyone pretended not to know. Her phone buzzed silently in her pocket. Emma ignored it, focusing on the lecture. But when it buzzed again 30 seconds later, she risked a glance under the desk. 2 texts from Detective Chen. We need to talk. It's urgent. Call me as soon as you can. It's about the Calabrese case. Emma's stomach tightened. She'd been cooperating with Chen for months now, providing testimony about the restaurant incident while carefully avoiding anything that might incriminate Moretti beyond what was already public knowledge. It was a delicate balance, helping the authorities without betraying the man who'd given her life back. After the confrontation at dinner, everything had moved quickly. Vincent had disappeared, gone into hiding, according to Marcus, taking with him several loyal lieutenants and a significant portion of the organization's resources. The evidence of his betrayal had been overwhelming once they'd known where to look. Encrypted communications with the Calabreses, suspicious financial transfers, meetings that didn't appear on any official schedule. But Vincent had vanished before they could confront him directly, and the Calabrese family had fragmented in the aftermath. Sal Calabrese had been arrested on unrelated charges that Emma suspected weren't unrelated at all. His son Anthony had taken over, and by all accounts he was even more dangerous than his father, and even more determined to see Emma pay for her role in their family's downfall. Miss Sullivan? Professor Martinez's voice cut through her thoughts. Would you like to explain the difference between systolic and diastolic pressure? Emma looked up, realizing the entire class was staring at her. Systolic is the pressure when the heart contracts, forcing blood through the arteries. Diastolic is the pressure when the heart relaxes between beats. Correct. Try to stay present, please. Emma nodded, cheeks burning with embarrassment. She forced herself to focus on the lecture, but her mind kept drifting to Chen's texts. What could be so urgent? The trials weren't scheduled to begin for another 2 months. Vincent was still missing. The Calabrese organization was supposedly in disarray, unless something had changed. When class finally ended, Emma gathered her things and headed for the exit, already dialing Chen's number. The detective answered on the first ring. Emma, thank God. Where are you? Just leaving class. What's going on? We got word from one of our informants. Anthony Calabrese is planning something. We don't know what exactly, but your name came up in intercepted communications. Chen's voice was tense. I need you to come down to the precinct right away. We're arranging protective custody. Emma stopped walking, standing in the middle of the bustling hallway while students flowed around her. Chen, I can't just disappear again. I have classes, commitments. This is serious, Emma. More serious than before. Anthony isn't like his father. He's impulsive, violent, and he's taken your involvement in Sal's arrest personally. Chen paused. We think he's planning to make a move soon, maybe within days. Emma closed her eyes, feeling the careful structure of her new life beginning to crumble. I need to think about this. There's no time to think. Just come to the station, please. We can discuss options when you're here and safe. I'll call you back, Emma said, then ended the call before Chen could protest. She stood there for a moment, students streaming past her, feeling the weight of impossible decisions pressing down. Then she pulled up a different number, one she hadn't called in weeks, and hit dial. Marcus answered immediately. Miss Sullivan, is everything all right? I need to talk to him. To Moretti. It's important. He's at the office. I'll send a car for you. No. Emma glanced around the hallway, suddenly paranoid about who might be watching. I'll take the subway, just tell him I'm coming. She ended the call and headed for the exit, her mind racing. She'd been avoiding Moretti lately, trying to establish boundaries between the life he'd given her and the person she wanted to become. But Chen's warning had shattered that illusion of separation. Emma was still connected to that world, still vulnerable to its violence. And if Anthony Calabrese was coming for her, she needed to know what Moretti planned to do about it. The office was in a renovated warehouse in Red Hook, overlooking the Brooklyn waterfront. From the outside, it looked like any other commercial building. Inside it was surprisingly elegant. Exposed brick and modern furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the harbor. Artwork that Emma suspected was worth more than most people made in a year. Marcus met her at the entrance, his expression concerned. Mr. Moretti is expecting you, but Emma, he hesitated. He's not alone. Who's with him? Tony and Father Russo. They've been strategizing about the Calabrese situation. Marcus studied her face. Whatever you need to discuss, maybe it can wait until... No. Emma's voice was firm. It can't wait. Marcus nodded and led her through the building to a corner office with glass walls that could be made opaque with the touch of a button. Currently, they were transparent, offering Emma a clear view of the three men inside. Moretti sat behind a large desk, his suit jacket discarded and his shirt sleeves rolled up. Tony stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear. Father Russo occupied one of the leather chairs reading something on a tablet. They all looked up when Emma entered. Emma. Moretti stood immediately, surprise and something else. Concern, maybe, crossing his face. I wasn't expecting you. Is everything all right? No. Emma remained standing, too agitated to sit. Detective Chen called. She says Anthony Calabrese is planning something, that I'm a target. She wants me in protective custody. The three men exchanged glances. Tony ended his phone call and moved closer. Father Russo set down his tablet, his expression grave. We know, Moretti said quietly. We've been monitoring the Calabrese communications for weeks. Anthony has become erratic, obsessed with revenge. And you didn't think to tell me? Emma's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. I've been going to class, living my life, thinking I was safe because you said the situation was under control. But it's not under control, is it? Emma? Moretti started, but she cut him off. Don't try to manage me or protect me from information I have a right to know. She looked at each of them in turn. I did what you asked. I helped identify Vincent as the traitor. I've cooperated with the police investigation while protecting your interests as much as possible. I've earned the right to know what's actually happening. Tony spoke up, his voice surprisingly gentle. You're right. We should have kept you informed. But we were hoping to resolve this before it became your problem again. My problem? Emma laughed bitterly. It's been my problem since the moment I picked up that gun. You can't protect me from reality just because you feel guilty about dragging me into your world. I don't feel guilty, Moretti said, and something in his tone made Emma look at him more carefully. He moved around the desk, approaching her with measured steps. I feel responsible. There's a difference. You saved my life, and because of that, you've been marked by people who don't forgive. That's not guilt. That's a debt I haven't finished repaying. I don't want your debt, Emma said, but her voice was quieter now. I just want to understand what I'm facing. Moretti gestured to the chairs. Then sit. We'll tell you everything. Emma sat, and for the next 20 minutes they laid out the situation in detail. Anthony Calabrese had taken his father's arrest badly. The old man was facing decades in prison on racketeering charges, all built from evidence that Emma's testimony had helped establish. Anthony blamed Emma for destroying his family's empire, and he'd spent the past 3 months consolidating power and planning revenge. He's been recruiting, Tony explained, pulling up information on his phone. Former Calabrese soldiers, independent contractors, anyone with a grudge against our organization. He's building something. We're just not sure what yet. An attack, Father Russo said quietly. He's planning an attack. The only question is where and when. And you think I'm the target, Emma said. We think you're a target, Moretti corrected. Along with me, Tony, several others. Anthony wants to send a message that crossing the Calabrese family has consequences. Emma absorbed this, trying to stay calm despite the fear crawling up her spine. So what do I do? Hide again? Disappear into witness protection? That's one option, Moretti said carefully. Or, Emma prompted when he didn't continue. Moretti exchanged glances with Tony and Father Russo, some silent communication passing between them. Then he turned back to Emma. Or we end this, permanently. Emma's mouth went dry. What does that mean? It means we've been playing defense for months, reacting to threats instead of eliminating them. Tony's voice was hard. We know where Anthony is, where he operates, who he trusts. We could resolve this situation in a way that ensures you're never threatened again. Emma stood up abruptly. You're talking about taking him out. About having him hurt or worse. We're talking about protecting you, Father Russo said gently, and protecting everyone else Anthony might harm in his quest for revenge. Sometimes preventing greater violence requires difficult actions. No, Emma backed toward the door. No, I won't be part of that. I won't have their fate on my conscience because I couldn't figure out another way. Moretti was beside her in 2 strides, his hand on her arm. Not restraining, just anchoring. Emma, listen to me. I understand your moral objection. I respect it. But you need to understand something. Anthony Calabrese won't stop. Not because of police pressure, not because of negotiations, not because we ask nicely. He's beyond reason now, driven by ego and revenge. The only way to ensure your safety, to ensure anyone's safety, is to remove him from the equation. Emma looked into Moretti's pale gray eyes and saw something she hadn't expected. Genuine concern, mixed with resignation. He didn't want to do this either, she realized. Or at least, some part of him didn't. But he would, because in his world, this was what survival required. There has to be another way, Emma whispered. Tell us what it is, and we'll pursue it, Moretti replied. But I've been in this world for 32 years, Emma. I've tried every alternative I can think of. Sometimes there are no good choices, only less terrible ones. Emma pulled away from his grip, wrapping her arms around herself. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Sometimes the hardest thing is accepting what you can't control, sweetheart. Focus on what you can change, and make peace with the rest. But how could she make peace with this? How could she stand aside while someone was targeted, even if that someone was a criminal who wanted her gone? I need time, she said finally, to think, to process all of this. Time is something we may not have, Tony said, not unkindly. Anthony could make his move any day now. Then give me until tomorrow. Emma looked at each of them. Let me talk to Detective Chen, hear what the police can actually offer. Let me make an informed decision instead of just reacting out of fear. Moretti studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Tomorrow. But Emma, you can't go back to your apartment or to campus. Not until we know more about Anthony's plans. Stay at the safe house in Park Slope tonight, please. Emma wanted to argue, to insist on her independence, to prove she didn't need their protection. But she wasn't stupid. If Anthony Calabrese really was planning something, her tiny apartment with its flimsy locks would be a death trap. Fine, she agreed. The safe house, one night. Marcus will take you, Moretti said. And Emma, I meant what I said. I won't let anything happen to you. Whatever you decide tomorrow, you have my protection. That's not negotiable. Emma nodded, too emotionally exhausted to respond. She let Marcus lead her from the office, back through the elegant warehouse and out to the waiting car. As they drove through Brooklyn toward Park Slope, she watched the city slide past her window and wondered how her life had become so complicated. 6 months ago, her biggest worry had been paying rent and affording textbooks. Now she was caught between the police and the mob, between her conscience and her survival instinct, between the person she wanted to be and the person circumstances were forcing her to become. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Chen. Emma, please respond. We're worried about you. Emma stared at the message for a long moment, then typed a reply. I'm safe. Need to think. I'll call you tomorrow with my decision. Then she turned off her phone and closed her eyes, letting the car carry her toward another night in the beautiful cage that had become her refuge. The next morning, Emma woke to the sound of sirens. She sat up in bed, disoriented, as the wailing grew louder. Multiple vehicles moving fast, somewhere close by. Emma went to the window and looked out at the quiet Park Slope Street. 3 police cars screamed past, followed by an ambulance. Then more cars, black SUVs that Emma recognized as the kind Moretti's people drove. Something had happened. Her phone, turned back on when she'd woken, began buzzing frantically. Calls from Marcus, from Detective Chen, from a number she didn't recognize. Emma's hands shook as she answered Chen's call. Emma, thank God. Are you at the safe house? Yes, what's happening? I hear sirens. There was an incident early this morning. A warehouse in Red Hook. Chen's voice was tight. Multiple casualties. We're still sorting through the scene, but Emma, Anthony Calabresi is gone. Someone took him out, along with most of his top people. Emma sank onto the bed, her legs suddenly unable to support her. What? It was professional, coordinated, clearly planned for weeks. Whoever did this knew exactly where to strike and when. Chen paused. Emma, I need to know. Did you have any knowledge of this? Did Moretti discuss anything with you yesterday? No. I mean, we talked about the threat from Anthony, but Emma's mind raced, replaying yesterday's conversation. Or we end this. Permanently. Chen, I didn't know this was going to happen. I swear. I believe you. But Emma, this changes everything. The Calabresi organization is effectively finished, which means... Chen's voice softened. Which means you're safe. Really safe. For the first time since this whole thing started. Emma should have felt relief. Should have felt grateful that the threat hanging over her for months had been eliminated. Instead, she felt sick. Someone had taken Anthony Calabresi's life. Multiple someones, probably. People had ended things violently, permanently, in a way that could never be undone. And it had been done, at least in part, to protect her. I need to go, Emma said quietly. Emma, wait. But Emma ended the call. She sat in the silent room, watching morning light paint patterns across the hardwood floor, and tried to process what she'd learned. Moretti had done it. Had to have been him. She'd asked for time to think, and he'd given it to her, by making the decision himself, taking the weight of it so she wouldn't have to. Emma didn't know whether to be grateful or furious. A knock at the door made her jump. Miss Sullivan? Marcus's voice, calm as always. Mr. Moretti would like to speak with you. He's downstairs. Emma dressed quickly, pulling on jeans and a sweater with trembling hands. When she came downstairs, she found Moretti in the living room, standing by the window with his back to her. He looked tired, his suit was rumpled, and there was a tension in his shoulders that Emma had never seen before. You did it, Emma said quietly. You went after Anthony. Moretti turned to face her. His expression was carefully neutral, but Emma saw something in his eyes, a weariness that went deeper than physical exhaustion. I protected you. That's what I promised to do. By having people. By ending things. Emma couldn't bring herself to use more explicit words. I asked for time to think, for a chance to explore other options. There were no other options, Moretti replied, his voice flat. Anthony had already set his plan in motion. We intercepted intelligence last night indicating he was going to strike today, at your school during your afternoon lab. He was planning to take you in broad daylight, in front of witnesses, because he wanted to send a message about what happens to people who cross his family. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. How do you know that? Because we've had someone inside his organization for weeks. Someone who risked their life to get us that information. Moretti moved closer. I didn't want to tell you yesterday because I hoped we could resolve it without violence. But when the intelligence came through last night, I had to make a choice. Wait and risk your life, or act and spare you from having to make an impossible decision. So you made it for me, Emma said, and she wasn't sure if she felt relieved or robbed of agency. Yes, I made it for you. Moretti's voice softened. Emma, I know you think I'm a monster. Maybe I am, but I also know that you're a good person, someone who shouldn't have to carry the weight of these kinds of choices. So I carried it instead. That's what debts mean in my world. That's what protection means. Emma sat down on the couch, her legs shaky. What happens now? Now? Moretti remained standing, silhouetted against the morning light. Now you're free. The Calabrese organization is finished. Vincent is still out there somewhere, but without resources or allies, he's not a threat. You can go back to school, finish your degree, build the life you wanted before any of this happened. Just like that, Emma looked up at him. I just go back to normal? As normal as possible, yes. Moretti pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and set it on the coffee table between them. That contains information for a trust fund in your name, enough to cover your education and living expenses for the next several years. Consider it the interest on my debt to you. Emma stared at the envelope without touching it. And you? What happens to you?